Hey everybody, this is Scott Mastley. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer here with Thread. Um, Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go through a few slides and then we will open it up for questions. And I want to be able to answer any questions you've got to the best of my ability. And I've added a few based on information that's come up and the ones that you submitted already as well. You are on mute, but you can chat in your questions in the box on the bottom right. We're keeping the questions in a moderated mode, so only I can see them to protect your privacy. Note that the event board in the top right of your screen, there you can find the slides and any resources from today's event under shared files. There are also dial-in instructions. If anyone has issues hearing the audio from the webinar, you can dial in. And today's webinar will be recorded, and we will post the recording on our website and a follow-up email as well. And if you're having an issue with your browser, Google Chrome is the one that works the best. Within about 24 hours, you receive the follow-up email linking the recording and the slides from today. And if you have any questions about that, follow up with us at marketing@threadhcm.com. And then, as always, just ask for a little bit of grace. If you happen to hear dogs or kids or thunder or anything like that, I do have two dogs who like to go nuts when the delivery person comes to the door. So hopefully we'll get lucky and that won't happen. We'll see. But let's go ahead and get started. So I don't know about you, but just lately I have started to kind of be sick of all this. So I just wanted to share. If you're feeling like I am, then we're all in it together. It's starting to get a little bit old, all that stuff that's going on in the world and all the things that we can't do and the limitations and the repeat cycles that are challenging all of us over and over again with, everybody knows someone who's gotten sick and what works and what doesn't, and all the political arguments and everything else is kind of driving me nuts. So what I wanted to do with today's presentation is transition you from the frustrated person to the one who's like this dude right here. I got all the confidence in the world. I'm ready to tackle all my demons here and make the most of it. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of information and some answers that will give you some confidence going forward. As always, follow up with anything that is unclear, or if you want extra clarification after the fact, we're glad to help. But this is the goal. So the question is, are you ready? Right? One of the things we want to help people do is to be prepared. I am an Eagle Scout. I grew up doing all that stuff, and so that be prepared motto is always in my head, no matter what I'm doing. So are you ready? Are you ready to transition into this new kind of work, whether it's temporary or for some companies, permanent? I read the other day that 54% of CFOs have decided that remote work is going to be a permanent part of their arrangement going forward, and that they no longer view it as a productivity drain the way they used to. So that's interesting. So are you ready to be safe and productive? We got a question about being productive with remote work. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the safety plans as well. How do you maintain high performance and high culture, which is what Thread as an organization wants to do. Our mission is to build high performance, high culture companies. So we want to help you be efficient, profitable, and productive, but we also want to help you have engaged employees, because that's a competitive advantage in any marketplace. You want to be able to attract and retain the best people for longer periods of time. If you can do that, you're going to have an advantage over your competitors who are constantly hiring and firing people and having to deal with the productivity drain and all of the other negatives that come along with that. Are you compliant? This has been one of the biggest challenges this year, is just how do we keep up with the new laws, the new interpretations of the laws, and what's coming out. So I did not get into any slides today about proposed stimulus packages or new PPP things that will probably be happening soon. You may have read in the news that there's a new stimulus package that's being proposed. I think there's a Republican package, a Democrat package, and we'll see where it falls out. But they are talking about another stimulus check for individuals, $1,200, that kind of thing. They're talking about adding federal money to the unemployment state benefits, but maybe $200 instead of $600, so people aren't making more money to be home than they were when they were working. There's also a proposal for possible new PPP wave of funding for companies under 300 employees who can prove that they've lost 50% of their revenue. And again, those are all just proposals. That's why I didn't put them in the slides, because I didn't want anybody to print this out and think that they're ready to run with that. None of that is set in stone, and anything is subject to change at any day, as we all know in this day and climate. How do you get ready to handle the non-routine challenges? One of the things I've learned over the years, and like 20 something years of HR consulting, is that companies tend to get themselves in trouble when they're dealing with non-routine tasks. Anytime something new comes up and you have to make a judgment call on what to do, you can get yourself in trouble. So it's better to have a resource, a second opinion to talk to and say, what should we do? What should we not do? What are you hearing all the lawyers say? How have the judges interpreted this law and case law? How have people been penalized if they deviated from this, and all that kind of stuff? And that's just one of the ways that we can help our clients. So obviously, what we do is we sell, service, and support iSolved payroll, human capital management platform, and then we also provide human resources consulting for all of our clients. And we can talk a little bit more about that at the end, but we'd love to help everybody. So let's boil this down and try to make it a little simpler. What are top five things that you can do in your business? Number one is establish the new protocol. And I'm going to break this down as well. So this is the big picture view right here, and then we'll start to drill down a little bit. That's usually how I do it. So establish your new protocol, which is, how do we operate now? What do employees expect now? What has changed? What's new? Can we document that by updating forms? Do we need new kinds of forms to do things like request emergency paid sick leave, which didn't exist a year ago? Do we need new policies that address some of the new issues that we're dealing with? And do we need to revamp some of our processes maybe? How do we hire people when they can't meet with us face to face? How do we give someone a new employee orientation when we're not even in the same room, right? So it's a new way of doing things. Some companies have taken great advantage of this by developing new products, new services, and some things that you may have experienced, they're probably changed forever. You know, I went out to a Mexican restaurant with my dad last night, and they had the little QR code on the top of the table that you scan with your phone to get the menu. And we were just talking and saying, why would anybody ever print menus again? Because if you can just scan it, why would a restaurant have the cost of printing menus and then cleaning the menus and all that stuff when they can just be done with that? So those are just little examples of things that are probably going to be changed from here on out. So I know not everyone is comfortable with change, and it can be very scary, but we're definitely in the middle of it. So we're trying to help you deal with that as much as possible by clarifying whatever we can. You also want to make sure your supervisors and employees are trained to understand if you have new forms, processes, policies, expectations, anything like that, they need to know what those are as clearly as possible. Saying at one time is usually not enough, okay? Then we're going to talk a little bit about what has not changed, because when you're in an environment when so much is moving and changing all of the time, you start to feel like, well, we're in a fluid environment, so I can slide a little bit over here if I need to, and nobody's going to pay attention to it, which is not the case when it comes to like the Department of Labor, the IRS, the government agencies that like to enforce regulations that they've put on businesses. So I just want to add a reminder about that. And then, do you want to get help to speed up the process and protect the business? And we'll talk about how we can do that at the end. It's not going to be a big sales pitch, I promise. So in terms of protocols and policies, which was one of the first things, what do you need to be thinking about? Well, we have released on our website, and I think some emails recently, a kind of future of work resource kit that people can sign up for that has return to work plans, safety plans, sample policies, sample language, sample letters, most of the basics of what you might need to be able to establish your new protocol and your new return to work plan. But if you don't have that, just think about this. Do you have a safety plan for your office? Have you communicated to employees what you're doing? Because even in a small business like ours, we may think everybody knows what we're doing. It's not a big deal. They're not worried about it. But I guarantee you there are some people who are concerned and worried about it. So if you just decide to communicate to them, sorry, here's what we're doing. We're staggering shifts. We are paying for extra disinfecting in our office. We are requiring masks. You have to meet virtually. Like, you fill in the blanks for whatever you're doing. And then you explain that to all the employees so everybody knows, okay, here's what I need to know now. This is the way work is now. So decide those things. It doesn't have to be very complicated, and explain it to everybody as much as you can. Do you have procedures for self-reporting, for temperature checks, for COVID tests? Have you decided if you're going to do those things or not? You can do all of those things in most situations. Have you communicated to your employees what's going to happen if someone gets sick? Because that is going to happen. They're either going to be exposed to someone who has COVID-19, or they're going to get it themselves, or they're going to be worried about getting it. All of those situations are going to come up probably over and over again, which is the most challenging part of that case for the rest of the year, or at least until there's a vaccine out there. So we have to be prepared for that. When you have people who say, I have symptoms, or I have been exposed to someone who's been diagnosed, you can use either a time-based or a testing-based response there, according to CDC. So follow the CDC guidance relative to that in terms of how long people should be out, when they should come back. And we can provide more specifics for that for you as well. If you have questions about that, please submit them. We can talk about it. So what specific policies should you be looking at? We're going to cover a few. These are a few. Your leave policies. You need to have an emergency paid sick leave policy and information about the expanded FMLA requirement. Remember that the expanded FMLA is only for people who cannot work or work from home due to their demands of childcare. Now, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, has clarified that even if you had your kids scheduled to go to summer camp and the summer camp is not there, that can qualify as not having childcare and needing to do some of this. So they're taking a broad interpretation of that. But that's the only reason you can use that expanded FMLA. Normal FMLA is only for companies who have 50 or more employees, and there are all kinds of little requirements to meet that and to be eligible for that. So this is a separate thing. Think of it as separate from normal FMLA in terms of how it's administered. Do you need to look at your PTO policy? Have you decided to be a little more flexible there, give a little more, adjust your attendance policy or work from home policy, which may say you can work from home 1 day a week? Well, now you have employees who might be working from home 5 days a week. So you need to update that policy to make sure it's reflective of what you're actually doing. Whenever you're looking at your policies, I always say write them in terms of what you're actually doing, not the ideal state, because it's much easier to change a policy than it is to change a practice. Look at your remote work policies. Like I said, do you have travel policies that limit travel, especially to hotspot areas? Do you require people to quarantine after they travel to certain areas, or you may have no travel? I see companies doing all of those things right now. Your return to work documentation. In other words, if you've had people who are furloughed or laid off, make sure that you're offering them a recall letter or a return to work letter to document the offer, to say, we'd like you to come back to work on this date for this amount of pay to do these duties. It's almost like an offer letter, job description, as much as you can put in there, and then give them the option to refuse or accept. If they refuse, then they've refused to come back to work. You take them off unemployment. You can give them a separation notice, and you can deduct them from your FTE count for the PPP. So make sure that stuff is documented. Interviewing, hiring, onboarding, training are going to be a little bit different. A lot of people are starting to do the video interview. Everybody's using Zoom and RingCentral and Microsoft Teams and all these platforms to do virtual meetings. And that's just something we're all going to have to get used to doing and learn how to do, whether we like it or not. So interviewing is going to switch to be more virtual now, and may be more virtual going forward. There are companies who sell platforms who support that. They can get pretty expensive, so you don't have to use those, but you can. iHire with iSolved has a component where we can work some of that in, so that's pretty cool. But how you hire people, you want to make sure you have the most efficient paperless process you can, because it's hard to get paper back and forth and all that these days, and print and file if you're not in the office. It's easier to have a paperless onboarding solution like we do have in iSolved, where you just send an email, they click on it, complete all their new hire forms, and they're good to go. And then training as well. Trend right now is to have a lot of have a learning management solution, which is an online platform, which we also have. And we can add that to your system with iSolved as well, where you can assign and track and send auto reminders for all the usual courses: sales, customer service, sexual harassment, all those type things that you want to, safety as well, that you want to assign to people. And then onboarding, how's that going to go? Your onboarding plan has probably changed a little bit. So you want to think about how you're going to do that going forward. So here's a scenario. David doesn't feel safe coming back to work. He's not been diagnosed with anything, does not have symptoms. He also doesn't want to quit and doesn't want to be terminated. What do you do in that situation? That's a tough one. So you as a company, let's assume you've already implemented safety precautions. The work environment is cleaned and disinfected daily. Employees are self-monitoring, meaning they're paying attention. They're letting you know if they have symptoms or should come in or not. You've told them not to come in if they have symptoms. You're distancing coworkers. You've limited travel. You've offered remote work where you can. If people meet face-to-face, they wear masks. I mean, you're doing all the things that you can do to create a safe work environment. So you've eliminated most of that argument that says work is not safe, right? So if people say, I just don't want to come back, I don't feel safe coming back, then you don't want to just jump right on, okay, you're fired or you're quitting. You want to start with having a little bit of a conversation. Why do you not want to come back? What makes you feel unsafe? And you can explain all of the safety measures you're taking, like the second paragraph here on this slide, right? To say, look, we're doing everything as safely as we can. The science is not perfect. Nobody knows for sure how this thing is going to get beaten, but we're doing everything we can based on current scientific knowledge. And then you want to follow up and say, are you in a high risk category, right? So what are the high risk categories? People who are over a certain age. I got the latest from the EEOC. This is as of about a month ago. And they're basically saying people who have diabetes, people who have serious medical conditions, asthma, heart conditions, immune deficiencies, cancer, HIV, AIDS, severe obesity, kidney disease, liver disease. They've recently added, as of this week, pregnancy and smoking. So even though smoking is not like a disease, or some people might argue that it is an addiction, but if people who smoke tend to have lung issues, and that would put them in a higher risk category. So if someone is in a higher risk category, then your next step is to determine whether you can give them some kind of accommodation. Can you give them some time off, paid time off or unpaid time off? Can they use this emergency paid sick leave? Do they qualify for that? Do they need to work from home, or can they work from home? So you work through the accommodations. Then if you're not able to accommodate any of those things, you do have work for the person and they're just choosing not to do it, even though you've created a safe work environment. Once you've gone through that whole process, then you can talk to them, if you're not able to do a leave or anything like that, about whether or not they want to give you a date going to return, or if they want to refuse to return. At that point, you could take them off of unemployment. You could give them a separation notice and all that kind of stuff. But you want to be careful doing that. That's what I'm trying to say. A big part of this is think about your supervisors and managers right now. And I see a question just came in. I'll hit that in a few minutes when I get to the question section. Most supervisors and managers in big businesses and in small business, but especially in small businesses, get very minimal, if any, training about how to be a supervisor or a manager. Most supervisors in small, fast-growing businesses are someone who was good at what they did, and they were capable of doing more, so they were promoted to managing people. But we rarely teach them how to do that effectively. And a lot of employment liability and claims and issues that happen are due and directly related to that fact. So if you want to minimize liability in your company, minimize exposure, and also help your managers and supervisors have greater job satisfaction and feel more confident in what they're doing, they've got to get a little bit of training, right? And there's no one size fits all, but there are specific topics and things that can help them do their job better and help them feel more confident and reduce those areas of exposure for your business. But think about your typical supervisor now. On top of what do I do with this problem employee, it's what do I do now with this problem employee who's saying, he doesn't want to come back to work even though we're doing safe things. It's very challenging. You have, I'm getting questions as an HR person every day that normally I would never have had to answer. But what do we do when an employee is diagnosed with this? That in the past has not really been an HR thing. And then I find myself regularly talking about science related to COVID-19, which is a little different. So there are new challenges that your managers and supervisors are having to face. And I want you to be aware of that and give them what they need. Think about what they need, get help for them, get training for them, whether it's a trainer who's on your team, whether it's the attorney you work with, an HR consultant like myself or someone on my team who can help out, or even a learning management system, right? All of those things are better than nothing. So you want to start by helping them understand what the expectations are, what the protocol is, what they're expected to say and do, and what they should not say and do in the situations that are likely to come up in the future. And I want to give you an example about this. So something that's new in the law, and it's something that might not come up very often. It is something that has come up with several of my clients over the years. And the new law is that the Supreme Court recently decided that the definition of sex in that list, when you have your equal employment opportunity policy or policy says we don't discriminate based on, and it says like race, gender, age, veteran status, all those type things, and it would say sex, right? And then recently, a few years ago, we added including pregnancy and other things. The list gets pretty long. If you look at California list, it's like a page. But you can now include in the definition of sex is sexual identity, gender identity and sexual orientation are both protected classes under the Equal Employment under Title VII. So it applies to employers of 15 and more employees, and it protects those two things. So because of that, what you need to do is look at your policy, like your EEO policy, and say, does it say including gender identity and sexual orientation, right? And some companies I've seen have even added including transitioning, transgender transitions or something like that. You need to look at your anti-harassment and discrimination policy to make sure it's up to date with that as well. Look at if you have an appearance policy, hygiene, dress code, something like that. You need to make sure that it doesn't say women are allowed to wear nail polish, men are not. Men cannot wear earrings, women cannot have a mustache, whatever you want to put in there. You don't want to have it separate between men and women because that is kind of going away. And you just want to have a general appearance dress code policy that can be as simple as saying dress appropriately for the client or the situation. That's as simple as it can be. Or you can get in a little more detail about what's not okay. Like sometimes I see things that say, hey, it's not okay to wear a tank top, flip-flops, all that kind of stuff, right? Or in a shirt with an offensive slogan on it that even if you believe in it, if it offends other people, it's disruptive at work, and we're trying not to disrupt productivity at work, right? So you can get into some of that stuff, and then you need to talk about, do you have a policy about restroom use? Do your supervisors and managers know what to say or do if that comes up? So as an example of this issue, I just put together this little slide about, okay, what would you train your supervisors about on this one topic, right? You need to talk to them about if you had an employee who said, I'm transitioning or I'm thinking about transitioning, the first conversation is to talk to them about what they're okay sharing and talking about. I've had employees who went through this who said, I don't want anybody to acknowledge it or talk about it at all. And that's pretty challenging. But I've had others who said, yeah, I'd like to actually have a meeting and explain to my coworkers what's going on so it's not awkward between us, right? And they don't have to do that. There's no requirement to do that. It's just a personal thing like anything else, right? What are you okay with us sharing, not sharing? And then you talk with the employee about, what name would you like to be called by? What are your What are your pronouns, right? We want to respect that for you. Would you like to update your LinkedIn profile or your email signature or things like that? You can't really change the I-9 form or legal forms unless the employee says, here's a legal name change, right? So you don't ask them for proof of a medical surgery or anything like that, or legal proof of their sex, or say, drop your pants, I want to see what you got going on there. That will not fly. So you ask people if they identify as a man, then they use the men's restroom, and the law is very clear on this. I've had a lot of people question me about this. If someone identifies as a man, they use the men's restroom. End of story. If they identify as a woman, they use the women's restroom. End of story. Doesn't matter if other people are comfortable or uncomfortable with that. There is specific language that the courts have addressed that basically said that is not your problem. If someone's uncomfortable with that, then you could provide a single seat gender neutral bathroom for others to use that they could use, or a multi-occupant unisex facility with lockable stalls. You don't have to do those things. And then you kind of say, hey, employees with questions or concerns should talk to HR. And then you could go through it as simply as that with your managers and supervisors, and make sure you reinforce respecting people's decisions and choices, right? So that was just an example. So what has not changed? Well, what has not changed is the wage and hour laws in the United States. So there are still wage and hour laws that must be followed and are enforced and can get you in big trouble. The problem with a wage and hour claim is that if an employee says that you did not pay them properly, did not pay overtime, misclassified them as an independent contractor where they should have been an employee, all those kind of things. Well, if the Department of Labor comes in and says, yes, you do owe them money, and they say you knew you owed that money and you didn't do it, then the amount of money you owe is automatically doubled. So if it's, $20,000, now it's $40,000. Plus attorneys automatically get their fees covered. So the plaintiff's attorney, if he gets a judgment for $1, then he gets his fees covered. So the dollar is not what gets you. It's the plaintiff's attorney's fees which kill you. I've literally seen claims where someone was paid $700 is what the company owed them, but they spent $60,000 in attorney's fees. And you have to pay that if you lose the claim. So it's pretty brutal. So I try to help all of our clients avoid that by making sure they classify their positions properly: exempt, non-exempt, independent contractor versus employee. Make sure you're paying hourly employees properly, paying them at least minimum wage, tracking their time, paying them overtime, any hours over 40 in a week. Doesn't matter if you're biweekly, semi-monthly, you got to pay overtime if they work more than 40 hours in a week. And then if you have salaried exempt employees, you want to make sure they are truly salaried exempt, and there are lots of tests for that we could talk about. And you don't want to deduct from their pay, because all those things can get you in trouble as well, unless it's appropriate. And then look at your state final pay requirements. Like, you can get in trouble in certain states if you don't give someone their final check within a certain period of time. And so you got to know what those are, and that's a lot to keep up with. Something else that has not changed is the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the ADA, the biggest thing you ever need to know about the ADA, or is if any employee ever asks you for an accommodation for any kind of disability, is that you need to engage in the interactive process. That's number one. And all that means is that you need to ask questions. You need to go through the process of saying, not what is your disability, what's wrong with you. You don't ask those things. What you ask is, how does that affect your job? Are you capable of performing the essential functions of the job with or without reasonable accommodation? Here's our job description, and your job description should include a section that says essential functions or duties of the job. So you can say, this is what they are. Can you do these? The job description should also have a little disclaimer at the bottom that all employees sign that says, yes, I understand all this, and I agree that I am capable of performing the essential functions of this job, right? The other thing that has not changed is the National Labor Relations Board, which is enforcing the National Labor Relations Act, which a lot of companies believe only applies to unions or unionized companies, which is not true. The NLRB can enforce labor practices against union and non-union employers, so they have authority to do that. If you get an unfair labor practice filed against you because you told an employee that they're not allowed to talk about their pay or working conditions or something like that, or they're not allowed to post a complaint on Facebook about their boss, then odds are you're going to lose that. Statistically, it's very, very hard to beat an unfair labor practice because the system is set up for them to win. It's a long story about how it's all set up, but it's a setup basically. if you have a union or non-union company and you get an unfair labor practice leveled against you, it's going to be hard to beat it. So you want to look at social media policies, make sure those are up to date, all that kind of stuff. Know when you can address someone for what they said and didn't say, and where they said it, and how they said it, and all of that stuff. And then you need to know that it is okay and it is legal for employees to talk about their pay and their working conditions. You can't tell them not to do that anymore. If you do, then you're kind of deviating from the law and you kind of open yourself up for an unfair labor practice. Okay. Applicant and new employee expectations have not changed either. And we're getting close to the presentation end part, so we'll get to Q&A in just a second. So stick with me. Hopefully you're being patient. Applicants still, they want to understand what the job is like, what the culture is like, what the expectations are, what the pay is. They want to be communicated with regularly. They want to have a speedy interview process. You know, if you have 10 interviews, you're probably going to lose people because they've gone somewhere else for a job. But, you know, 3 or 4, that's pretty normal. If you drag it out too long, people will get frustrated with it. So you want to make sure it's long enough that you learn as much as you can about the applicant, but not so long that they're getting frustrated with it and they go somewhere else, right? New employee expectations as well. This is really important. One of the things that almost every company I've ever worked with over the years, no matter what industry, is can we make our orientation process better, our onboarding process better? How do we do that? And we can help you with that. We can help you with best practices and what some of the most progressive best companies to work for do that help with this process as well. But it's actually not that hard. The simplest thing is to start out with having a plan. So when the employee starts, they feel like they're part of a plan. They're getting plugged in right out of the gate. I was once hired for a job when I was in school where I showed up the first day and the manager, who was my direct supervisor, didn't know who I was, didn't know that I was hired or that I was starting or what I was supposed to do. So he made me go stand in an office and kind of watch what was happening on a lumber yard. And after about 6 hours, I went back to him and I said, I think I get it. The trucks pull up, they're loaded with stuff, they pull out and go to a job site. What else can I learn? You know, it's my first day. So that was a bad experience. And I became the HR director of that company later on, so I fixed all that. But employee expectations are important. So think about what you can do. Do you have a first day plan? Here's what you're going to do your first day on the job. Here's when you should show up, call in, log in, complete this training, have virtual lunch with these people or an actual lunch, right? Here's 15 minutes with your supervisor, with the CEO. Here's where you're going to talk about the values of our company. Here's where you're going to talk about the expectations of your job. Here's someone who's going to talk to you about how you should dress when you're in front of clients. Here's somebody who's going to tell you what the unwritten rules are here and what irritates people at work and how you can get fired. You know, let them know all of that kind of stuff. But all you got to do is put it into a little schedule, a little plan. If you're doing that, even if it's for 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, you're doing better than most, believe me. And then the other thing that has not changed is that the plaintiff attorneys are circling like sharks. If you're in the HR world like me, I get emails every day from law firms all around Atlanta and the US who are saying, join our webinars. We talk about all of the litigation that is happening right now due to the COVID-19 issue. A lot of it is due to employees saying I was retaliated against because I said I didn't want to come back to work, or because I had symptoms, or because someone in my family's sick, or my child's out of school, all that kind of stuff. So the way you beat those claims as an employer is you take good care of your employees, you're honest with them, you're transparent with them, you tell them what you're doing. If you can't do something, you tell them why you can't do it. You set up your protocols and policies like we discussed, and that helps alleviate a lot of that. Also, many states are starting to pass these laws. Georgia has one called SB 359, And in some of the proposed stimulus package that I've read about, there is part of that may even be a federal law that helps protect employers from the kind of claim where someone walks into your business as a customer and then says, I got sick there, you have to pay all my hospital bills and everything else, right? Because we all know, we've walked around the grocery store and Costco and everywhere else, we could have gotten this stuff anywhere. It's hard to prove where we got it, if we got it. So Georgia, for example, has issued this SB 359, and you can post either one of these warnings on the front door of your business or near your point of sale locations to let people know that, you know, you're not going to be liable for that. So I know I have had some clients who read this and said, that sounds a little aggressive, maybe even harsh. I'm not sure I'm willing to post that at the entrance to my business. And that's totally up to you. I'm not saying you have to do it. It's just a protection that is available to post on the front of your business if you want, that could limit your exposure to some of these unnecessary lawsuits. Whew, okay, I've been talking a lot and you've been listening a lot, so I really appreciate it. And I just want to mention at the end here, before I get into the questions, that this is what we do at Thread Engage, which is what we call our HR services, is we work with small businesses specifically. Most of our clients are under 100 employees, under 200, you know, most of them for sure. We can work with bigger clients, but most of them are small, who need help with HR, who don't have a full-time HR person, have an office manager or a CFO or someone who's responsible for HR. They might not like it, or they may not like it but haven't been educated in it, or they may have been educated in it and are overwhelmed with all the demands and keeping up with it. So we help with all those situations. We have multiple packages that are affordable for whichever level you choose, starting at $150 a month all the way up to a few $1,000s a month, depending on how much help you need and want. And so we can work with anybody. So I just want to encourage you that if you're not already a Thread Engage client for HR services, give us an email or give us a call. That email, hr@threadhcm.com, will get to us. And I wouldn't wait until all this is over. Why struggle? It's only going to get more complicated. Call us now and let us start helping you now to make your life a little bit easier, okay? All right, that was it. That was my pitch. Now I'm getting to the questions. So first question that was chatted in is, when we discuss limited travel, we're talking about business-related travel, but what about those employees who choose to go on vacation? It's a great question. What are employees doing when those employees return to work other than temperature checks and routine things? Is anyone doing quarantine on vacationers to hotspots? Yes, there are some companies who say, look, we have travel restrictions that are business-related, but also if you choose to go on a personal vacation, we would request that you don't go on a vacation to a hotspot such as fill in the blank, right? If you do, we will require you to work from home for, typically it's like a 14-day period before you can come back into the office. And before you come back, you've got to be symptom-free. Some companies are requiring a test, but not everybody is. Some are just saying that, using the time-based method, saying if you quarantine for 14 days and the last few days are symptom-free without the help of fever reducers or anything else, then you can come back to work after that time. Not all companies are doing that, because some of them frankly just say we cannot continue to operate, send everybody home for 2 weeks at a time when they can't work from home. It's easier for companies who can have employees work remotely, virtually from home. It's much tougher if you're a manufacturing facility, distribution warehouse, where you need people there to do the work. You know, your property management company, you need people to show the apartments, you know, that kind of thing. It's much more challenging. So yeah, some companies are doing that. Any idea if South Carolina has legal wording for the front door, like the one for Georgia? I have not seen that yet. But if I do run across that, I will definitely share it. I know there are several states that are starting to pass that. Georgia's just the first one that I saw. One of the attendees of this webinar actually told me about it and sent it to me. So I really appreciate that. We're all in it together, man. Okay, let's see. So those are the only two questions that have popped up on the chat so far, but I had a few that were submitted ahead of time. So one of the questions was unemployment claims. What do we do if we have an employee who has been out a while? We know we're probably not going to bring that person back. And in Georgia, you have to file claims for the employees. You have to put them on a partial spreadsheet where you're filing for them. If you're outside of Georgia, you don't really have to change anything. You've probably given them a notice. They've filed their own claim, and so you're kind of out of it. They just keep doing their own claim. But in any state where you are filing for them, you don't have to convert their claim. I recently submitted a lot of stuff to the Department of Labor. It took me 2 months to get an answer, and I did get answers to about 7 or 8 hot questions that I had. I'm going to share that with some of you today, and then we're going to distribute some of that as a follow-up as well to our group after this. But I literally had to contact all of the state representatives and all of the state senators and the state commissioner and all of my local representatives for the county where I live in Georgia. And I just tried everybody several times. For 2 months, I tried to get this. I submitted every online form, left every voicemail, email, everything you could think. Finally got an answer back from one of them and got my answers today, which is very convenient. So, Department of Labor answers. Now, this is Georgia. Some of these are outside of Georgia as well, okay? So, here's a question. If an employee's been laid off, does the employer file for 14 weeks and then have to convert them? The answer from the Department of Labor. Employers are not required to convert claims. There is no limitation on the number of weeks an employer can file claims on the worker's behalf. Good to know. Another question for Georgia employers specifically is, okay, if I do convert a claim from the company filed claim to the employee claim, who does that record count against? Because all the federal extension stuff now has been extended that says if the employer is filing on behalf of the employee, that workers' comp claim will not count against the employer's record. Someone just asked me, can you share the SB 359 verbiage? Yeah, it is on the slide, and the slide is available if you go to the event board and the resources tab. It's on the slides in there. And then when we follow up, we can do some more information about the actual law if you're curious about that. So unemployment claims, how long are they going to go? So this was interesting. You know, we've heard 14 weeks, 26 weeks. We've heard they could be extended, everything like that. So all new state unemployment claims filed after March 15th were established at 26 weeks. But in addition, the Federal CARES Act allowed for federal extended benefits, which is an additional 13 weeks after they exhaust their state benefits. And then the state, Georgia, extended benefits another 20 weeks. So in Georgia, it's up to 59 weeks of unemployment benefits. That's how long they could continue to get unemployment benefits. And like I said, the federal money, that extra $600 a week, is going away this week actually, but they're going to replace that with something eventually. We just don't know what that's going to be. So if I were you, I would anticipate all of your employees who are currently on unemployment calling up and saying, I'm ready to get back to work pretty soon once that money drops off. So for those of you who are trying to decide, should I convert these claims to individual claims or not? If it was me, I probably would not, because if you do, now those claims are going to count against your unemployment rate. But if you don't, they won't. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have employees you fire for performance or they quit, they're supposed to get a separation notice in Georgia and file their own claims. Not all states require that. So benefits could be paid for a long time. If an employee chooses not to come back to work temporarily because he doesn't feel safe, does the employer have to add him to their unemployment claim spreadsheet? No. Employers are not required to continue to file the employer claims on behalf of workers who refuse to return to work, even if it's temporary. Employers should report the refusal to the Department of Labor. Okay? And then there's stuff about specific pay in Georgia, and we're going to share this with everybody. Here's another question. If employees used unemployment early in the year for non-COVID reasons, does that have any effect? Possibly is the answer. When a claim is filed, it's in effect for the benefit year. Benefit year is the 52-week period in which the claim was filed. The weekly benefit amount is set when a new claim is filed. It does not change during the benefit year, even if the employee returns back to work and earns additional money, How can employers check the status of their claims when they're filing each week? The Georgia Department of Labor says we currently do not offer that option for employers, which is kind of shocking to me that you, as an employer, you're paying into this and covering all of this claims and all this money, but you don't have the ability to check on the claims and the status. It's kind of crazy, but they're just not there yet. And then I said, is anything changing this month other than the extra $600 going away? And he said, the emergency rules were amended on July 17th. Changes were made to the partial claim filing requirements, extending the non-charging of employer accounts. That just means that the money paid out to the employees is not going to count against the employer accounts when you're filing for them. Does HR initiate unemployment claims that are not COVID related? Good question. So if you terminate someone for performance related reasons and it's not COVID related, then they would file their own claim. That's true in almost every state that I've seen. Let's see, I had another question about work from home. What are companies doing in terms of work from home? How are they measuring productivity? Are they using apps? That's a great question. There are apps out there. My neighbor just retired because he had had such a phenomenal year because his company sold software that helped people work from home. So he had a big year, so big up to this point that he said, I can retire now, and he's retired. I was like, wow. So that business is booming. And a lot of companies are buying software where they can monitor when you log in from home. You can monitor keystrokes. You can have software that takes pictures of people sitting at their desk to make sure they're there. That's pretty invasive. I would advise against that. That's just my personal opinion. Employees don't like that. And there's a lot of unemployed people and a lot of companies who are going to be hiring not too far in the future. So I try not to give them more reasons to go somewhere else if I can avoid it. But you can use apps. You can have chats. We use a chat app where we've all set up different team chats. We have a culture chat, a leadership chat, a all company chat. You can chat people individually. And so that's something we didn't use before at Thread, but we use it all the time now. It's just something I'm in the habit of checking every 15 minutes or so. I'll look on there and make sure I'm responding. It's a great, easy way to share information. But there are new ways to do things like that. So yeah, in terms of measuring productivity and worried about that, like I said, one of the shifts in thinking in the world probably right now is that working from home is not necessarily a productivity drain if you're in the kind of position where you can do that. You have to decide, how do we measure productivity and success in this job now, right? And you should be able to do that whether someone's working remotely or not. Now, what you can't see is their effort they're giving forth in the office or at work. So you can set up activity metrics if you want. We have some sales folks who are working from home right now who are earning activity points for doing certain things. Like, I've made this many calls, I have this many demos set, I have had this many conversations with prospects and delivered this many proposals, things like that, right? I don't even know if that's what they are, but I'm making it up. But that's the kind of stuff that you can set up in terms of activity metrics, right? What are you doing as an activity level each day that gets you closer to achieving the productivity goals you have? And then you have actual results, which are, for a salesperson, are you closing deals? Are you selling or not, right? That's easy to measure. For operations folks, it may be, how many trucks have been loaded without being returned? How many orders have been taken and entered that didn't have to be corrected later on, costing us more labor time, right? And product time and gas and trucks having to go pick things up, right? So you think about what matters to you, how do you make a profit, what makes a sale stick, all of that, and how do you measure that? And then what does each person's job contribute to that as a company? How does their position contribute to what you do as an organization and what makes you successful and profitable? And it's not always, did you close a deal, load a truck, generate a report, something like that. That's always part of it. But there are also, what are your company values, and can you measure that? One of our company values is deliver wow. It's very important for us to wow our customers, to do more than what they expect, more than what our competitors are doing. We do things like we measure this with our companies. We post publicly on our website the time to first response. So I recently had a prospect say to me, I talked with this person at ADP who said they will give us an answer within 72 hours. Can you beat that? And I said, well, here's our website, which shows the actual time that it takes our team to respond to all the tickets we get. And it's live, it's updated every day as we go. And it was about an hour. So yes, we can beat that. And we do measure that. You know, it's important for us to respond to our clients and answer their questions as quickly as possible because we know it's important to them, right? We also send out surveys for what we call our NPS score, where we ask people, how are we doing? How could we do better? Right? So that's how we tend to measure, deliver wow. And then we give examples to new employees when we hire them. What does that mean in your role? How do we expect you to do that? And then there's additional training throughout their career with Thread on how to do that as well. So that's how you can measure a value and use that as part of your process, your performance management process as well. Okay, one person asked about transitioning back. What are other people doing? I've heard a lot of companies say, you know what, if they're capable of doing remote work, they're going to do that, or a hybrid of remote work for most employees and in-office work only for the people that need to be in office, at least for the next quarter, and many for the rest of this year, who've just said, you know what, we can't predict what's going to happen. We're just going to settle in and say, this is what we're doing, right? At Thread, I can tell you what we do is we have a situation where most of our employees are capable of working from home, but we do have employees who might prefer to be in the office. So we're limiting office accessibility to less than 10 people. And our employees sign up with a sheet in terms of who wants to be there ahead of time to make sure we don't have more. Because with 10 people or less, we can easily distance everyone in the office and make sure people are not close together. You know, we can masks are voluntary. We paid for extra cleaning and disinfecting in our office that the building offered. We shared all of that with our employees. There's a little bit of access restriction to the building. And the building has taken steps to have a cleaner, safer environment as well. And then we have shared information with our employees anytime if someone in the building even had diagnosed with COVID, we'll share that with our employees and say, look, if you're in any of the high-risk groups, definitely stay out of the office, you know, for a couple weeks. If you're not, we still prefer you to be as safe as possible. And we talk through that stuff. So yeah, companies are doing combinations of all of those things. I do actually have a couple clients who have never gone home, have never sent anybody to do remote work. They are working exactly like they did 2 years ago throughout this entire thing. So it's a wide spectrum, and you just got to figure out what works best for you, and we would be glad to help with that. There's a slide on here that just kind of shows all of the different ways that we help our clients with HR. So feel free to study that if you're interested. And I don't think I have any other questions on here, and I think I've covered all the ones that were submitted ahead of time. I just want to remind you that we will be doing more of these town halls and future of work type presentations. Lori Winters, our owner, is really excited about this, and we all are too. And she's going to be doing some interviews and podcast type things where she's talking to people about how do you work remotely. She has I think a company lined up who has been 100% remote for years, well before this, and she's going to get best practices on how they do it, how do they measure performance, how do they keep employees engaged, and there's a lot more of that coming. So stay tuned to our website and our emails, and call us anytime you need help with anything. We want to help you as much as we can. And again, we appreciate you signing up, paying attention, and like I said, if there's any other way we can help, give us a call. I would love to partner with you for HR and get started. So thanks a lot.